Hey guys, before I start, have you ever seen Ace Ventura? I feel like I look like Ace Ventura, the White Devil.
All right, this white devil thing has gone far enough.
Anyways, so welcome back. There's been something on my mind I really want to share with you. If we are the sort of people the Lord can depend upon to ensure that freedom continues on, that we can defend the Constitution in these last days as we are preparing for the ushering of the return of Jesus Christ. And you might not like my answer, so let's talk about that. Okay, so as you remember, it has been spoken of by Joseph Smith, which is validated by multiple records, such as by Wilford Woodruff, I believe John Taylor as well, and other very close, very reliable sources, that he did prophesy that in the latter days, the Constitution would hang by a thread. Now, there's some debate as to whether or not he is saying that the Latter-day Saints will be the ones to prevent it from falling into the hands of other people, but we know as Latter-day Saints, we have been given revelation from God to know that it is divinely inspired for the freedom of all flesh everywhere. But do we actually defend it? And are we the sort of people that can defend it today? And this is going to come down to what I call the Captain Moroni Test. But before we get into that, I need to give you some backstory as to why I'm talking about this, why this has come to my mind. And that is because I have observed for a long time now, but especially recently, we have this obsession with niceness. Now, this is not the same thing as people wanting the teddy bear Jesus, as other Latter-day Saint channels talk about, but that is a problem that's part and parcel of this. What I'm talking about is the fact that Latter-day Saints equate niceness with Christ-like love or Christ-likeness, and niceness is not Christ-like. He was kind, but also you have to ask yourself, okay, if we think kindness is Christ-likeness, then how do we reconcile the fact that there were times when Christ was not actually showing forth kindness? I think that might be boggling some people's minds, because every time I share this with other people, they don't realize that you can't use the same tactic at all times for all things. That you actually, and Christ had to as well, you actually have to use situational tactics, but still be Christ-like about it. So let me give you some examples, and these are things that really go against, I believe, this whole need for niceness. Let me share with you some examples. I think what we should learn here is that we should stop creating pseudonyms and misinterpreting attributes of Christ and Scripture in order to mask our own fears and mask our own cowardice. So going on, let's go to some actual scriptural examples directly now that go against this idea of this niceness, because we need to strip away these emotional misconceptions from the scriptures in order to better understand what the scriptures are telling us about what it means to be a follower of Christ, to be like him, especially if it comes to political things. So let's give some Christ-like examples in the New Testament. It says, and I'm going to quote from the New International Version just because it might be a little bit easier for people to understand. But in the Gospel of John chapter 8, Jesus has a heated debate with a group of Jewish leaders. And he says to them, "You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding the truth, for there is no truth in him." That's pretty intense. So he didn't just say, "Guys, I don't appreciate you disagreeing with me and not believing that I'm the Messiah." What he said is, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. What are his desires? Well, he's a murderer, and there's no truth in him. He says, when he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Talk about a major burn. I don't want to be like those in the church who like to use these examples to excuse themselves for their lack of tact or their lack of reverence. I just want you to understand that Christ is multifaceted. He wasn't afraid to confront people. Here's another example in Matthew chapter 23. Jesus delivers a series of woes against the scribes and Pharisees. He repeatedly calls them hypocrites. For example, he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those who are entering do so." He's telling them, hey, like, you're not doing your job. You're preventing other people from progressing. You guys are hypocrites. Going on, he compares them to whitewashed tombs, the whited sepulchres. That's pretty bad, because saying, okay, so on the outward you're trying to look good, but really inside you're full of corruption. So what should you understand? Was Christ ever in a mode in any of the scriptures where he preferred to hide and cover up the truth or not defend the truth because he was afraid? Now, there's times when he did not speak his piece, right? Once again, tactical situations, situational awareness. What do you use without giving in to the temptation to become angry? There's righteous anger. I'm not going to get into that, but without giving into some of our natural tendencies, which are contentious, but you still must contend. Christ is clearly contending with these leaders who want to kill him. And they try and they desire to kill him multiple times. And in the end, they do. And here's one last example. Luke chapter 13. So some of the Pharisees warned Jesus that Herod wants to kill him. And what does Jesus say? He says, "Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I will reach my goal." All right, enough examples of Jesus. Let me give you some more contextual examples as to why this is really important for us to understand, because this really bugs me. So a couple years ago, I thought it might be a cool test to see if people were interested in buying a t-shirt, one that I had helped make as a missionary. And it was to convey kind of like God's army, warriors for Christ, kind of like stripling warriors concept, but for missionaries specifically. So in the picture, there's a silhouette on the front, and half of that silhouette is a missionary with scriptures in his hand. The other half of him is a modern day warrior. So instead of using like the ancient stripling warrior look like it's normally done, I just went with a modern context. And that also had to do with something that I shared as a zone leader, as a missionary with my team. We were talking about special forces and likening that to how these missionaries have been trained. Anyways, so I shared that and I posted on Facebook to see if people are interested. And I got some comments from people that were just, and like in particular, this one lady said to me, she's like, "Great. So if now this is how we help people come unto Christ. We're going to shoot them if they don't follow us."
Huh?
That was the gist of what she said. And I thought that was just so dumb. I remember I commented back to her. I said, "Yeah, so you have no problems with the idea of showing a warrior carrying a sword, because getting hacked to death with a sword is so much more noble and less painful and beautiful than with a gun." So the point is, people got offended because it went against their sensibilities when it comes to what being a warrior of Christ looked like. And somehow we paint a beautiful, rosy colored picture over what it really meant to be a warrior for Christ. I mean, think about those stripling warriors. These were boys who were carrying swords, who were literally cutting people to pieces in battle and getting cut themselves. They were fighting. It was not a glorious, beautiful thing, but their faith was. Let me give you another example. If you have ever made a comment, you've probably noticed I like to be active in the comment section. And I find it pretty important, though, that there are times when people, if they're going to say very stupid and offensive things, and it's pretty obvious they're doing so, to call them out. And that's for a couple reasons. One is, I don't think you should just smear poop all over my channel. And so I like to establish boundaries by defending my channel. But the other side is, what if a Latter-day Saint who's struggling with their faith comes across some of these comments and they don't understand these people are sarcastic, dumb, or just spewing lies? You should respond. And it's not always going to be like, thank you, sir, for your kind message. I'll take into consideration. When sometimes really what we ought to be telling these people is to knock it off. And also what they're saying is not true and valid. To confront them. Is that so scary for people? But I bring that up because I recently got a comment on one of my more recent videos where someone was trying to remind me that, even as in the comment sections and everything else we do, make sure we are Christ-like and we show, we're peacemakers, blah, blah, blah. You must understand, I am naturally a peacemaker. I try to make peace. I don't like fights. I don't like contention, but I'm not afraid to contend. And if that hurts someone's perception of what Christ-likeness is, well, then that's a problem. And I know this individual who commented is not the only one. This is a very common thing. I've seen it across many Latter-day Saint channels. It's ridiculous that if you're going to call out someone who's trying to tear down someone else's faith or whatever else, if you're willing to get into this, Christ did calls on, woe unto you hypocrites, you liars. You're children of the father of the devil, who is a murderer and a liar, and you want to do his work. Like, are you going to put a comment on Jesus's video and say, you could be a little more Christ-like? Once again, are we, and I want you to ask yourself this, are we actually just trying to hide our cowardice? Guys, I really need to share with you one more thing, because this is going to drive it home. And this is going now to explain the Captain Moroni Test. And if we are actually able to defend the Constitution like we ought to be, like we need to be, which is not going to be something that's rosy and sweet and comfortable. So you guys know Captain Moroni, right? Of course you do. Alma chapter 46 has always been one of my favorite chapters. And if you watched some of the older videos on this channel, you should already know that. But I want to share with you some contextual things that really matter because they are a reflection of us as Latter-day Saints today. So in Alma chapter 46, just read the title heading. It says, Amalickiah conspires to be king. Take a minute there. Weren't the people already under a really great form of government, right? Like they were ruled by the voice of the people. They had a vote, they had a voice, and they got away from kingship because there's a lot of dangers and problems with that sort of form of government. Now, let's liken this to ourselves. In our day today, it doesn't have to be seeking for a king for this to be applicable or relatable. It is seeking for a tyrannical form of government because it sounds better versus a government where people have to be self-governing. So he conspires to be king. Let's go to verse 4. Verse 4 says, And Amalickiah was desirous to be a king, and those people who were wroth were also desirous that he should be their king, and they were the greater part of them, the lower judges of the land, and they were seeking for power, and they had been led by the flatteries of Amalickiah. Okay, so these people who are in places of power in the government, they've been flattered away by him. He's pretty convincing. But it doesn't stop there. Let's go down to verse 7. It says, And there were many in the church who believed in the flattering words of Amalickiah. Say that again. There were many in the church who believed in the flattering words of Amalickiah. They didn't say they were flattered, though that is what it means. They believed in the flattering words of Amalickiah. Understand that. So there's a number of people who are already being deceived to think a wrong thing politically. And it says, Therefore they dissented even from the church, and the affairs of the people of Nephi were exceedingly precarious and dangerous. So because some of these people are falling away, it's becoming exceedingly precarious, dangerous. And verse 8 says something very telling. Thus we see how quick the children of men do forget the Lord their God, yea, how quick to do iniquity, and to be led away by the evil one. Verse 10. We see that Amalickiah, because he was a man of cunning device and a man of many flattering words, that he led away the hearts of many people to do wickedly, yea, and to seek to destroy the church of God and to destroy the foundation of liberty, which God granted unto them. So we have this very clear picture. People in places of governmental power, they want to follow him and want him to be king. People in the church now believe in his flattering words. And we could go off on whole other tangents and videos about that specifically. And if you want to hear about that, put it in the comment section. I will happily dive into that. But here's where it becomes more important. This is the point I'm getting at. It says, that in verse 11, obviously, Captain Moroni is seeing this problem. And going back to verse 7, it's this situation has made the time for the Nephites, their civilization, in a precarious state. It says that he rent his coat, he took a piece thereof, and wrote upon it, in memory of our God, our religion and freedom, and our peace, our wives and our children. And they fasten it on the end of a pole. Now we know that he posts it all around. And what do the people do? They come running. But you have to ask yourselves this question, because no one ever does. Why the heck did Captain Moroni have to make this title of liberty? I mean, put it on his coat. Put it out there for everyone to read. Put it in all these cities around about for people to read. Why would he have to do that? That's not his. It's not his calling in the church. It's not his position in the government. He's a military leader, but his job as military leader isn't to make war with his own people. Why would this man, who we know to be very, very righteous, that we should be like him, why would he have to do that? He would have to do that because the people who are not believing in the words of Malachi, the saints in the Book of Mormon who are still true and faithful to their faith, they were not awakening to the awful situation that they were in, to their precariousness. And he had to wake them up, because if they were awake, and if they were actively doing what they should have been doing, there would have been no precarious situation. They would have already done what happens next, which is the covenant. They're going to defend their freedom, and then they basically cast a vote and they say, no, we don't want a king. We want to keep our constitutional form of government. And Malachi flees, and you know the rest of the story. That is what should have happened from the very get-go, but it was not going to happen, and the government was going to collapse and become this form of kingship, all because these saints, right, the church members, the believers, and the other people in these cities who may not be members but did not follow Malachi, they were not awake. They were not defending what they knew they ought to be defending. And I'm sure they saw all this happening, but why didn't they speak up? Captain Moroni had to go out and do this to stir them awake. So here is the Captain Moroni test now, because I'm going to say out there that already too many of us are asleep. We see this stuff happening, but we're not taking action on it. It could be the exact same reasons the other Nephites did not take action. They're busy with their jobs, raising their family, their church callings. It's just not that high of a priority right now. They're going to get to it someday, or maybe someone else will get to it. Well, we already have the Spirit prompting us. We already see, we have so much information out there that shows to us the Constitution is hanging by a thread, and we need to defend it. And we already have the words of people like President Benson and modern day prophets and apostles. There's plenty of times President Oakes has said things, Elder Christopherson, Elder Bednar, Elder Quentin Cook, and even actually President Nelson. They have said things. They have essentially raised their own banner. But are we coming together? Are we awakening? This is the Captain Moroni test. Do we come running, and do we actually organize ourselves, make ourselves heard? I mean, they came with their swords. They are saying they're willing to put their lives in the line to defend. Sorry, I know I'm kind of going all over the place. Let me just simplify this. What is the Captain Moroni test? The Captain Moroni test is, if we are called upon to boldly, even hotly contend for our freedom, for our rights, and I mean our constitutional rights, hopefully that's understood, and we're called to do so without a shred of niceness, would we be able and willing to do so, even to the laying down of our own lives or the spilling of blood, of other people's blood in that process? Or actually, let me ask it in a way that might be more relatable. Are we willing to do so at the loss of jobs, friends, opportunity, social status, or even social and public acceptance? If you want to know my answer, the answer is no. We as Latter-day Saints, I'd say generally as a larger group in America, do not pass the Captain Moroni test. We're not willing to sacrifice these things. And that's a problem. I was not willing to for a really, really long time. I truly was a coward. I'm not afraid to admit it. And I hope if you're feeling like you have this inclination to shrink away, to not want to engage for whatever reason, or this inclination to cover your cowardness with fake Christ-likeness, I want you to take a moment and gird up your loins. Fresh courage take. Our God will never us forsake. And soon we'll have this tale to tell. All is well. I don't know why those verses came to my mind as I'm speaking this. I didn't plan to say that. So my fellow saints, if you're listening to this, prepare yourselves to be the people God needs us to be, that has been prophesied, that will defend and support the Constitution as it hangs by a thread. Just because you may like the president we have now, you may not, but I feel like most of you listening to this channel probably do like the president we have now. Just because you like him doesn't mean the Constitution is not in a precarious state. It does not mean the Gadianton robbers have all fled and they don't exist anymore. It does not mean we are not in a precarious situation. We are. And we need to not take it easy on ourselves. Right now is actually the best opportune time to go out and make the most good happen. Because it's only going to get a lot worse and a lot harder. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. So comment below. I want to know, what are your thoughts regarding this? And do you have any of your own personal examples of when you were covering your own cowardice, or when other people have done that to you? I don't want to create fights among Latter-day Saints. I just want us to become self-aware, right? The first step in repentance is to recognize we've done wrong, right? I repent all the time. I'm not perfect. And please, actually, if you want to support the channel, I want to take a moment here and just say, click on the links there. There's some ways that you can support this channel. I'd appreciate that. Everything that you do to support us, whether it's sharing this video, commenting, or sending us money by buying a book or sending a donation, it helps so much, and I appreciate it. But all right, live free until next time, guys. I'll talk to you then.